Evening and welcome to the October 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning. My apologies to those in the audience and anyone watching at home for our late start today. For anyone viewing the meeting remotely, you will find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department website at accgov.com/planning. And for those of you attending here in person today, on the table by the door, you'll find a sign-in sheet and copies of tonight's agenda. For each agenda item, we will begin with a report from ACC planning staff, and that will be followed by a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes. We will then hear from members of the public who wish to comment. 3 minutes are allowed for any member of the public who wishes to address the Planning Commission. When addressing the commission, please provide your name, address, and the nature of your interest in the project, and direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the applicant. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants or by members of the public at the podium. Written correspondence received by noon yesterday has been forwarded to the Planning Commission and is part of the public record. Any additional written materials that anyone wishes to place into the record must be read during public comment within the 3-minute time limit. For all speakers, please pay attention to the timing device near the podium. The device will display a yellow warning light when you have 30 seconds left and a red light when your 3 minutes is up. After the public comment period, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. And after that, the audience will take their seat. The applicant will take their seat in the audience. At that point, the public portion of the agenda item is closed and the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss the item. We will receive no additional public or applicant comment unless requested by a planning commissioner. And finally, please note that the microphones in this room are sensitive and that the meeting is being broadcast live. So the microphones may pick up any conversation. Please turn off or silence your cell phones. So beginning at the top of our agenda in the general business section, item 1 is introduction of staff reports and all other documents submitted to the Planning Commission at this meeting into the official record. Do I hear a motion? Motion by Mike. Second by Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item 2 is approval of the September 5th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mike.
Second.
Second by Monique. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item 3 is May Court's review and public comment.
The MTP was adopted on Wednesday, yesterday, so we now have a new MTP for the next 25 years.
Okay, and that
Updated again in 5 more years.
and to be clear for the record, that MTP means
Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So it's our long-range funding plan for the region for Clarke, Oconee, and parts of Oconee and parts of Madison, all of Clarke County.
okay. Thank you. And then finally, we have one housekeeping matter, which is that I'm informed by staff that the one item under new business on our agenda tonight, 1300 US Highway 29 North, that we have a late request by the applicant to table that item. So procedurally, they can't unilaterally table, but if any member of the Planning Commission wishes to make a motion to table that item, we can consider that motion.
I'll make a motion to table it.
Okay, motion to table that item by Beresford and second by Commissioner Lord. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so that item will be tabled. That brings us to the old business section of our agenda, and the first item is 0, 290, 310, and 322 North Avenue, and we'll begin.
Good evening, Planning Commission. For the benefit of our audience, my name is Stephen Jaques. I'm a planner here in the Planning Department. I'll be presenting the staff report for the aforementioned project. You all have seen this before. It has been around in several different versions. Right now, you're seeing the master version, so it is now come time to vote on it. The applicant is requesting to go from commercial general zoning on the property to commercial general plan development in order to request some waivers for their project. The purpose is to build a mixed-use commercial and residential project. It includes a gas station, 10,000 square feet of retail, which could be part of the convenience store is part of that is associated with the gas station. There are 128 multifamily apartment units, 260 bedrooms. 20% of them have been set aside for participation in the inclusionary zoning affordable housing program. The project also includes surface parking as well as a plaza space that's mandated by the code. The applicant has requested 6 waivers. Staff supports all of them, and our reasoning is laid out in your staff report. This is the aerial of the site. You can see it's entirely wooded right here. We have the shopping center, former Piggly Wiggly, now U-Haul. To the north, we have the loop is off screen to the north as well. We have North Avenue, the major roadway you see running along the left here, some commercial property to the north. And then to the east, we have Stroud Elementary off screen here. And then to the south, we have, I believe it's Facts. Their office building is right here on land that is owned by Athens-Clarke County. And then you also saw a rezoning here last year at Bray Street for some apartment housing, affordable housing there. Future land use designates this area for general business, and that does not need to change per this request. It would remain the same. This whole general business area, your staff report makes mention of our growth concept map that has been presented to the commissioners, the mayor and commission as part of our future land use update that we're also going to talk about tonight. And we proposed a town center node here at this, in this general business, this general area here. So this project would complement that node, but just that's mentioned in your staff report very briefly. The zoning here, it's CG Commercial General on the left. It becomes CG PD on the right. So already compatible with the zoning map here. You can see we've got some government zoning to the bottom, RM2 to the bottom as well, and then CG consistent with those commercial uses top. This is a rendering of the site. We have North Avenue here. You're going to have your gas station, which is accessed with the drive off of North Avenue. You're going to have the convenience store portion of it on the ground floor of this building, but then you're also going to have several stories of residential on top. This colored area is the plaza. There's also some plaza space over here, a little bit of amenity space, recreation space up at the top. And then you have a fully residential building with some parking tucked under it on the back there. You also have an extension of Ruth Street running along the southern border of the project, set up that way to allow for interconnection with the Bray Street property. It may help Bray Street property as they are trying to get that property developed for their project. Here are the building elevations. We have this would be the front building. You would have the gas station canopy approximately here. And then you have your commercial on the ground floor, and then you have 4 stories of residential above. And then this would be the back building, all residential with that parking tucked under here, taking advantage of how the grade changes. It's on a slope, as you can see here. And then this is the gas station canopy. We had asked the applicant if they had a rendering that would show how both the building and the canopy would work together, but that was not available. Our staff report concludes by saying that the project is largely compatible with our 2023 comprehensive plan. It adds affordable housing. It adds housing on an infill location where we already have infrastructure. It complements the nodal development that I referenced in our growth concept map. It provides some options for interconnectivity. The gas station does create a bit of a bike and pedestrian conflict point here where those cars and trucks are going to be turning in. And that runs a bit at odds with the plans to redesign North Avenue Transportation and Public Works Department has secured a raise grant of $25 million to redesign that corridor to be more bike and pedestrian friendly. So this does create a bit of a conflict point, but the urban format of this project with the residential above, integrating the gas station into a multi-story building offsets some of that conflict and maybe a model for future development in some of our more urban areas as we continue growing and as we begin to run out of developable land. It also adds a second life potential. You may have seen some filling stations, gas stations around town that are no longer gas stations. They may be restaurants or bars, and those gas station canopies are now outdoor seating. So this has that opportunity if a gas station in the future does not exist here. It is compatible with our future land use and our zoning maps. Like we said, we did support the 6 waivers as outlined in your staff report. We are recommending approval with a condition. That condition is laid out here. And there's a lot of text here, but the gist of it is that we want to make sure that Ruth Street extension is actually constructed in the alignment shown and built to the property line for interconnection at a future date, according to Transportation and Public Works standards. Right now, it would be a private street because it only serves that one property. But in the event that it is connected to an adjacent property, then it would become a public street taken over by the Transportation and Public Works Department. So that's what that condition is all. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from the applicant.
Thank you, David Ellison, on behalf of the applicant. We're pleased to appear before you today with a favorable staff recommendation. Some of y'all may recall.
Mr. Ellison, I can hear you just fine, but I know there are some interested members of the audience behind you who may not be able to hear you. So I ask you to speak a little louder.
So as y'all may recall, we appeared before y'all in May of last year with the first itineration of this project. We did not have staff support. We did not have y'all support. So we went back to the drawing board, made some tweaks, and came back. In June of that year, we realized there's a conflict between transportation public works requirements and planning requirements. Transportation Public Works did not want 2 access points, but due to the traffic counts involved and our planning standards, we had to have 2 traffic access points. So that's what led to this current itineration. We ultimately pulled that and reapplied. And this application utilizes many different aspects that advance the comprehensive plan. One is that this puts commercial development into a walkable node in the surrounding community. The other aspect is that this increases access to affordable housing. We will be utilizing the inclusionary zoning bonus, setting aside 20% of the residential units for those qualifying with 80% AMI. We're also
Generally, we ask the audience to wait their turn. I believe you said 80% AMI.
Yes, that is 80% AMI. And so that would be part of this binding PV. There's also a commercial.
Mr. Ellison, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but I do see a few people cupping their hands to their ears behind you. So
so there's 80% AMI is part of the binding plan development. Okay, so we get, in order to comply with the zoning requirements, we always have to have this 80% AMI requirement for 20% of those units. That can never change. This is a binding site plan that is going to be hopefully approved for the Mayor Commission, can never change. What you see is what you get. We believe it provides great value to the community in large part because this is part of the tax allocation district. So North Avenue has a tax allocation district where any increase in property taxes actually stay in this district. So this isn't going to go to another part of town. The increased value is going to stay in the North Avenue tax allocation district. This is the largest undeveloped portion of the North Avenue tax allocation district. So that means that this is going to be a great benefit, we think, for the community at large, but also for North Avenue in particular. One of the key features of this is that it adds the right-of-way requirement. So it's going to align with Ruth Street. And so there's going to be health, safety, and hopefully there's hopefully maybe a stoplight one day that can help with people traversing not exactly at a approved crosswalk. Generally, we think this is going to be a great project for the community at large in this specific neighborhood, because it's quite frankly a very difficult site to develop. It's been vacant for a long time for a reason. There's a transmission easement on the front portion of the property. There's a steep kind of a slope at the back, plus there's a triangular portion. So you got to force everything forward. And there's a reason why it's been vacant for a long time, why it's taken us 2 applications and 18 months to kind of get where we are right here. It's taken a lot of hard work with staff, my client. We appreciate y'all's comments, and we think we have a project that would be great for the community at large and for everyone, and get this piece of property contributing to the neighborhood, contributing to tax dollars to Athens-Clarke County. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But appreciate your time and hopefully a favorable recommendation this evening. And one other item too, just to clarify, they sought clarification for one of the waivers we were seeking about the waiver for ground floor commercial. We would obviously be saying we're waiving the 50% ground commercial requirement to allow residential use on the ground floor, those portions. We thought that was implied, but just want to put on the record, make it express. So just put that out there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison. At this time, we will hear from any members of the public who wish to comment on this proposal. Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak in favor of this proposal? Or to give remarks one way or the other?
We don't have to officially, we're in favor of the project. We don't have to come to the podium, but all of us are here in favor of the project. We appreciate it. It's a first-class project for North Avenue, and we hope to have many more. And we hope that your project will encourage some of the others on North Avenue to clean their act up. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, why don't you step to the podium?
I mean, all the time with these, Quazon Payne, unpaid engineering representative for District 9, working out of the office of Ms. Ovita Thornton. We often hear about 80% AMI, but as you know, there are many different AMIs. Are you using HUD AMI or are you using Athens-Clarke County AMI?
It's Athens-Clarke County's AMI. Well, it is, we're complying with Athens-Clarke County's inclusionary zoning ordinance, which I
Okay.
believe uses HUD's AMI.
Okay. Because there's a big discrepancy between HUD's AMI and Athens AMI. HUD is like, I think 100,000 and Athens-Clarke County is actually 54,000.
That is beyond what that is something that you have to take to the Board of Commission to change the ordinance.
Okay.
That's beyond what we can do today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Is there any other member of the audience wishing to comment on this proposed project? And Mr. Ellison, do you wish to have your 2-minute rebuttal or?
Anyone has any questions, happy to answer them. But thank you.
Is there
Investors
any
happy to answer
plan-
them.
Just one question. Is there any definite plans for the other commercial beside the gas station,
No,
convenience store?
that we got to get through.
Do you know what square footage will be left for other retail? You don't.
Basically, you got to get the permitting before we kind of get to that point.
Let me just happily say.
Just for the sake of the record here, Mr. Ellison would step to the podium and if you want to speak to any question that you've heard in private, just.
Sure.
So it's
I'll
on the
just
YouTube video and people watching at home will know what
So
question.
there's a question as if we knew what other commercial uses would be going into the space, and we don't, because we got to go through zoning and permitting before we really get to that point.
Okay, I'd like to comment on. We would strongly not like to see others in the store.
And I will relay that information, and I don't know what's going to happen. I'll always relay that at all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ellison. At this time, we will bring the conversation behind the rail. Who would like to start us off?
Start.
Yeah.
A couple of items of clarification. I think that the difference between HUD numbers and local numbers are just that the local numbers are scaled to our area, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think that is pretty clear. And then my other comment is just I like this project a ton. I think I'm really glad the applicant is so persistent in figuring out this difficult site and yeah, that's really all I have to say. We've talked a lot about this project and I think it'd be great for North Avenue and I want to see more like it.
Yeah, I'll just add to that I appreciate the applicant's multiple revisions of this project. I think it's come a long way and I think it's a very good project now. We're talking 260 bedrooms, I believe. And I'm very happy to see the applicant choosing to use the Athens-Clarke County inclusionary zoning ordinance that this body and the county commission worked very hard on and staff worked very hard on. And just to clarify one thing for audience, I think Mr. Ellison addressed this, but the AMI numbers are baked into the Athens-Clarke County ordinance. So our commission could change them as they see fit, but the applicant can only opt into these ordinance that we've provided for them. So what they'll be doing is 80% of the units would be market rate, as I understand it from the application. 20% would be permanently fixed as affordable at the 80% AMI level. Although Mr. Payne's comments are well taken, and that may be something that the commission would wish to address in the future to ensure that the AMI numbers in the ordinance are the correct ones. Does any other planning commissioner have any comments?
Just a simple comment. I like this, but I also think it's a good example of when you don't get what you want the first time and you listen and you improve and you tweak, you come up with something that the neighborhood and the area likes more and works. And then this, what we all seem to like, the way the gas station and the convenience store is built in like that and not just all out in front. I just thought it was a good example of from the very first time we saw it all the way down to where we are. They listened and they improved.
Any other comments? Are we ready to vote? I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. Do we just have one vote on this one? Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve. Actually, I'll make a motion to accept the staff's recommendation to approve with the condition.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion to approve with the staff's recommended condition by Sarah, seconded by Alex. Stephen, do you want to do a roll call?
And is Chair Hall voting today? Please.
Approve.
Beresford?
Yep.
Sams?
Yes.
Sanders?
Yes.
Lloyd? Yes. Motion passes.
Motion passes. And just for the record, although I, as the chair, don't vote unless it's to break a tie, I support this project as well. And I appreciate both the applicant and the neighborhood's involvement and comments on this. So thank y'all for coming out. The next item on our agenda is the future land use map update progress report. And I will turn it over to Mr. Tam.
Yes, and I'm only gonna say a couple of quick things, and then Mark, I believe, is gonna give us a presentation and a little detailed rundown about what we've been going through. But I will say again, and we have several members of the steering committee, it is a fantastic committee, and it's one of the rare opportunities that I tend to just be quiet and listen because the questions and the concerns are very good that they're coming up with. We've got people in real estate. We've got people in a whole lot of areas that bring an enormous amount of knowledge. As I will also say, piercing questions that don't sting, but they're very right in there. Like they're impressive questions that aren't broad. Often I do broad questions, but others can just really get right in there. And that helps pull out something that could be a bigger issue possibly down there. And then the last thing I'll say, and then I'll get out of the way from Mark. But we are getting to what we've been talking about, the fun part, where we've been listening and educated by people in the community, people on staff, a lot of folks, and we've been listening and listening and listening, having a meeting per month, and now we're going to sort of amp it up a little bit, and we're going to be applying what we're learning and come up with the actual map and the different ways it's going to move and shift. And so, yeah, we'll be kind of going at a new gear, I think, starting now. So, Mark, I'll be quiet and let you talk.
Okay, yeah, we've had lots of discussion about how to set up this room as best, and with the audience here, I'm gonna talk from over here, so hopefully I can get everywhere. I'll try not to yell in Monique's ear too much. And just for the benefit of the audience, my name's Mark Beachuk, and we put this presentation together for the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission has heard and been a part of much of this. So if you're going through some of this and thinking, how do those things line up? We as staff would love for you all to reach out to us. We'd be happy to provide some of those details. We have meeting notes and minutes from the steering committee. We also have a lot of documentation from the work we did in the fall. So we kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but we are going to go back just a little bit here for the benefit of the Planning Commission. But just in case the audience is thinking that there's a few pieces missing, that's kind of purposeful so we can kind of get on to this next step, but we'd be happy to provide that information to you after this meeting. So just so the Planning Commission is aware, this is why we got the steering committee together. We did the public input in the fall with, I believe, 29 events in the fall. And then we built the growth concept map out of that. And then we put the steering committee together through the mayor and commission. Looking to make purposeful arrangement of the intensity, variety of the future land use designations throughout the community. This is a 20-year plan. Used a lot of data, and we also are in the process of using more data and gathering data with our contract with Urban 3. Just slightly unfortunately, they are mostly out of the Asheville area and are on a bit of a delay because of the storm that went through there, but they are still working hard with us, and a lot of them are remote and able to keep helping out. A lot of this is about growth estimates, how our infrastructure is, and how it is looking forward, about our housing needs in the community, about protecting the environment, and then also how this all gets put together in an economic development strategy. So when we are finally done with this, the steering committee will make a recommendation that will come back to this body, the Planning Commission, for a recommendation, and then for final action with the mayor and commission. You can click on that for me. Okay, so yeah, just getting back to the purpose of the future land use map. So we started this with the land use budget approach. So a lot of times we've gone through these exercises and we've thought we've known the best ideas, or we've used, good thinking. We are actually trying to put a lot more data to this. We are trying to get out there and utilize our resources with our GIS department and our budgeting process. And that led a lot to why we hired Urban 3 to do the work they're doing. They're doing an econometric analysis of the community, showing the value of parcels and the value per acre that those parcels have compared to the services that are required for such a parcel. So it's going to have spikes from tax revenue, and then it's also going to have sinks from the cost for service to those parcels. And we're hoping those spikes even out a little bit more higher than the sinks pull it down. So we then engage the community quite a bit. Tonight is another one of those instances where we'll accept some input and have some discussion here. And then we are hoping to provide some growth scenarios through the steering committee, through this group as the Planning Commission, to provide to the mayor and commission for some final votes. So we've got a few big ideas and we've developed some guiding principles. Those big ideas are that growth pressure will remain constant. We've been at a really steady clip of growth for quite a few decades now. That growth is telling us that would be approximately 30,000 or more new residents by 2045. A lot of that information has led to a need for housing variety and availability that must be increased, and also to replace expensive and aging infrastructure. So one of the big points out of this is that we're looking to maintain and support the infrastructure we have before we extend it out, which is a costly endeavor, has impacts on the environment and our topography, our natural systems, and also the ongoing maintenance and budget of Athens-Clarke County. So some past iterations of this project, you've seen us show the different zoning by type. These are basically in terms of intensity from the low intensity at the top of that column over there on the left-hand side to the most intense on the right-hand side. You can see with our AR and our RS zones, that's about 2/3 of our community in terms of area, the green and the yellow. When you add in the government, institutions, and parks, it gets up to around 80%. Then we have our job creation areas in purple. That's almost another 10%. Before we get down to what a lot of this body sees, which are multifamily projects and commercial projects, which makes up just about 11% with 5 and about 6.5 there respectively. A lot of public input. I'm going to cover a few points here, and there's going to be a lot of text here in a minute that I'm going to go through rather quickly because I would like to get on to some public input and some discussion from this group. This is all the stuff we did in the fall. So received a little over 2,000 comments through our formal surveys and public input sessions, quite a bit in conjunction with that from public meetings and from speaking to folks on the phone and talking about this project when we were out in the public. We landed with this growth concept map after the fall public input sessions. This is a node and corridor approach. So where you see the splotches of yellow, orange, and red, those are areas we expect intensity, more intensity. And then when you see the corridors, which are the dotted gray lines, we also expect them to lift up a little bit more. However, the big part about this is that everything that's not in green, and the green can play its role as well, green being the rural or greenbelt areas, but everything that's in that lighter shade of yellow, orange in the center there around. So we've got downtown in the middle, and then we've got sort of in-town Athens, the older bits of Athens and neighborhoods. And then the gray area is a little bit more of our suburban Athens and our growth over the last few decades. We expect all those areas that aren't in the nodes to be able to pick up a little bit of incremental growth themselves as well. So that led us to these guiding principles, developing the corridors and nodes ripe for transformation and transportation, which almost came out of my mouth there. Minimize sewer expansion. So one aspect I didn't mention here is this red dotted line that goes around. It kind of cuts up and then cuts back down just up 441, cuts back up towards Athens-Tech in the Kroger area, out 29 and 72, cuts in before we get over to Winterville, and then down along the east side. So this edge right here is Wood Davis Road. So that's everything that's inside our sewer service area. I believe that's right around 45% of our landmass. So one of the big things of this project is to minimize that sewer expansion. So how can we find opportunities within inside of those areas to grow capacity and build off of our existing network? We want to reduce travel distances. We want to put people closer to their jobs and their daily needs. Plan for incremental growth in all neighborhoods, as mentioned, that are served by sewer, and then support environmentally and fiscal sustainable growth. So we talked a little bit throughout our process here. We've had our 6th meeting already. So that was an intro meeting, 4 meetings on some topics, and then 1 meeting on our future land use. Our first topic was our rural areas. And so we developed this map after the fact. This is actually from a later presentation, but we're talking about very low residential density, conservation in these areas, agricultural functions, and opportunities for low impact commercial. So this is where we're getting into the text here. And I'm going to kind of breeze through this. We can come back to this as the discussion unfolds. But a lot of this was about, are there opportunities? Where can we find those opportunities? Most of the discussion was about not expanding sewer in these areas. So how can we find a few opportunities out there? Just by right development has the potential to add up to 1,300 units in our current greenbelt. But do we want to shift the policies a little bit to allow a little bit more? Do we want to shift some of those policies to allow development around some of our schools that are out in our rural area? Or things like Oak Grove development, which is out 129, the new development out with the Publix and the apartments out there, which is right on the edge of our rural area. Do we need to look at restrictions on protecting the land, protecting prime ag land? Our steering committee felt that a lot of the money that's gone to our AR area has gone to sort of estate lots and smaller operations. There is definitely some agricultural operations and some conservation going out there, but they thought maybe that trend would continue and that we would have less of a farm presence and more of just sort of a rural life presence that is not served by sewer. Lastly, there's a pretty big discussion about who's coming in, that we need to plan for the people, that not everyone wants to live inside the city. So how do we provide some of the opportunities for folks that want to live outside of the city, but still in a reasonable fashion? So conservation subdivisions, we have a few. Our steering committee talked very heavily about those. And if we are going to see some development, if we can have it in that compact nature and maintain some land at the same time. Our second meeting was about infrastructure. So here is the map. You can see the red sewer service area. Much easier here. All those green lines are our sewer pipes. All the blue lines are our water pipes. We are nearly 100% served by our city water throughout the community. But you can see there in the green inside that red boundary, which is about, I think the number's up there, 44.6% of our land mass. That's where our sewer ends. So being able to put more people in front of these pipes and roadways and wires that we already have in the ground saves us on maintenance, saves us on preserving the environment, and also allows us to look to the future. We're looking at 20 years, and we think we can contain that growth mostly within this red boundary. And in 20 years, we might need to consider moving beyond that red boundary. So we'd like to preserve it for as long as we can, so we can have that as sort of a pressure relief valve for the future, but we also expect a little bit of development in those areas. In terms of infrastructure, we heard from our public utilities department. So we had a panel for these last three ones here. We did not have a panel for the rural one. We had two members of our public utilities department, our traffic engineer from Public Works, two members from our SPLOS team, our transit director, and our airport director as well. So in terms of what we heard from them, we heard a lot about public utilities, and I think you've been probably hearing about this. We've heard about this with cases before the Planning Commission, system maintenance being a huge part of what they're doing. They've got a 20-year work plan focusing on the Brooklyn, which is some of the work you've seen around Baxter Street, along the Middle Oconee Interceptor, which is going out in between 129 and Atlanta Highway, going up the Middle Oconee River there, and then working on downtown, especially with some of the pressure we've had, especially with things like the Classic Center, big developments like that. There's some need downtown for some replacement there. We have 3 wastewater facilities that have all been revamped, so we have quite a bit of capacity there. If we can get everything to them, it's more about the pipes than it is about the capacity at the facilities. So we have had a little bit of expansion of service. Mostly that has been developer-led with a few lift stations. This body heard a subdivision up Newton Bridge Road, if you all remember. That's, I think, finally coming online. We've seen some plans come in. There's been talk about the quarry. So Athens will be taking over the quarry in 2030. There's still a little bit of time before they can start filling that up with water, but that's a future look to provide backup for us. We currently pull from the rivers, and then we've got a backup option at Bear Creek Reservoir, which is over in Barrow County. There are limitations on sewer capacity. We are being maxed out in a few areas, Middle Oconee being a big one. That's next on the list. And then McNutt's Creek, which is everything that's on the south side of Atlanta Highway and sort of south and west of Timothy Road. So areas that are going to need some improvements before we can see a whole lot of change out there.
Mark, can I just ask a question?
Yep.
You say, I'm not sure that everybody has a clear idea of what east of the middle of the river means, because the river kind of meanders.
Yeah.
Can you give us some guideposts on what?
Sure. Yeah. So out Atlanta Highway. So the Oconee River's cutting through right where Beach Haven, West Broad is. That's the most in-town location there. What's just on the west side? The At Home is the shopping center right there. It used to be Pool and Hobby Lobby. Thank you. Hayward Allen. Yeah. So yeah. And then so Hayward Allen, as you get right outside of the split off of Epps Bridge. And then so everything that's a little bit on the north side of Atlanta Highway before you get to Mitchell Bridge, and then out past the mall. So that's going to be everything that's west of the Middle Oconee there. And then the Middle Oconee is fed from 129, I think, is the ridge. So everything that's going out, say, Tallahassee Road, And then a little bit on like Oglethorpe Avenue on the in-town side. And then, of course, everything that is south of Atlanta Highway and west of Timothy Road. So mostly residential going out Epps Bridge Parkway there towards the Oconee connector and the development on Oconee.
Okay, thank you.
Also ask a question while we're on it.
Sure.
When you say limitations on sewer capacity, do you mean on what those rivers can handle?
On what the pipes can handle. So the pipes follow the rivers.
Okay.
Is the simplest way to think about it. That's why we're talking about the rivers. Yeah. Rivers being the bottom of the basins. Most of the pipes follow those. And it's like a tree. They've got a trunk and then they've got stem. And then they've got, I think the branches going out from there are the interceptors. And then they've actually got ones that are branches. So it gets smaller and smaller as you go out like a tree.
Capacity is really sort of enough pipes to get the water where it needs to go.
Yes, size in the pipes, correct, yeah. And then also there's this thing called I&I, which is about infiltration into the system. So as pipes age, they percolate a little bit more and we need to, bolster those up a bit, yeah, to keep flow going.
Thanks.
So in terms of lift stations, lift stations can move some development out of creek. However, so yeah, sorry about that small text. Those small texts are the response from our PUD department. The PUD department has done a great job maintaining our gravity system and they always prefer it when it's possible. There is the opportunity to put nasty stuff into those rivers, and also the lift stations have lots of nasty sewage going through them. So the mechanical apparatus fails much quicker, much more expensive. So when we plan for those, we need to plan ahead. We do have the opportunity to expand one of our lift stations on the east side of town, which could open up some development without adding a whole heck of a lot of costs. But when you see lift stations, think about ongoing maintenance and the cost there.
Are there very many lift stations in town?
We just have the two public lift stations currently. The one up Newton Bridge would be the third one.
Okay, thanks.
How do we monitor the integrity of piping now? Is it by flow?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a complicated thing, but flow is the biggest part of it. Yeah. And then in terms of, would it be a problem to develop those areas? The response there is that that's a political question. The leaders of the community need to step up and say, we are willing to take on those maintenance costs and possible issues with them. Not to mention everything else that goes with expansion. So expanded roadways and other networks. That's a bit of a political discussion there. So in terms of Transportation Public Works, they wanted to let us know that, COVID really changed our traffic patterns. We've had limited arterials and collectors in the last 40 years. Most of the expansion has either been the Loop 316 or subdivision roads. And when you see subdivision, not just residential, but commercial subdivisions as well. They made a point about level of service. C and D can be okay in places, and even E and in-town locations at peak times. It's kind of like a grading scale, but they added E in instead of jumping straight to F from D. Big challenges, growth, obviously, cost money, signal replacements, and traffic signals and maintenance. Pedestrians are a big part that our Transportation Public Works are looking at. So more people, more facility needs, more crossings, more connections, things we hear about a lot with our planning commission cases. Limited right-of-way in older locations, so putting more things into the right-of-way. The area in and around our road networks and our trail networks is a little bit constrained in some of our older locations. And then they mentioned, of course, more funding would always help. So they don't want to condemn properties and take properties away from people. If we can find ways to fund some of these things. And then, of course, they're always looking at bicycle infrastructure. We have plans such as Athens in Motion, our bike ped plan, and our Vision Zero coordinator who are looking at those things on a regular basis. Last few bits of the infrastructure are SPLOST. So big thing about SPLOST, getting money from non-residents, help ease the taxpayer burden to bring some of these amenities and to support some of this infrastructure. A little bit easier to pass, but harder to get things on those lists. In terms of transit, we're talking public transit here, opportunity to assist the roads by taking trips off of them. We are a fixed route bus system for the most part now. That's something that our transit department's looking at for other opportunities. They're looking down the road for bus rapid transit potentially. That would only probably be on our major corridors, or maybe only our most major corridor, which is going to be east to west, Atlanta Highway, Broad Street, and Lexington. And then they question whether public transit should stop at political boundaries. The rest of our transportation infrastructure generally does not stop at political boundaries. Can we get our surrounding neighbors on board? Mostly that's towards the Oconee side due to the development that's out that way and our close connection going out Epps Bridge. In terms of the airport, recent expansion and updates allowing more capacity, which equals more revenue. They're looking hard into passenger service. I think they were right on the cusp before COVID, and now they're getting back to that point. And then lastly, this body has seen a few things in the airport overlay, and I think we have one or two more coming. There's been some easing of allowances in the airport overlay. So does that give us some opportunities to develop in and around the airport? Gaines School Road is a big corridor that would have some opportunities. Lexington Road is the other one that has some opportunities. So this body saw a case on Lexington recently that was just approved by the mayor and commission this week. We had our third meeting with our institutional partners. So this was Piedmont Athens, Clarke County School District, UGA Architects Office, Athens-Clarke County through our interim assistant manager who I believe when we had this meeting, he was just the central services director, but has since become an interim assistant manager. And then Athens Technical College. So in terms of Piedmont, 427 beds, operate around 350. They're talking with development in the neighborhood there, lots of historic houses in and around the Piedmont campus. And then what we have is the UGA Medical School coming right next door. They're looking to have about 120 students, looking for good access. One of the main things that the hospitals want is to make sure that people getting into the hospital can get there quickly and receive the care that they need. So looking to limit traffic issues throughout there as this body looks at a few of those nodes that we have that are very near the hospital. In terms of UGA, looking to provide opportunities on contiguous land. Most of our, a good majority of the UGA property abuts the main campus. There are some outlying properties. And then the medical school is also, down the road, down Prince Avenue, trying to keep that walkable for the students, some of which who do not have cars. They're looking to go a little bit more vertical, easing up on the surface parking. Excited about the expansion at the health science campus. In terms of housing, they're looking to meet the first year live on campus requirement. I believe we heard that they have right around 9,000 first year students and just a few less beds than that. And then, so their housing ratio, they've got about 45,000 students total. I think it's just underneath that. And with about 9,000 of those being first year and living on campus. An opportunity for the community to get the benefits of rental to a large body that can rent throughout the community, but also how do we bring those students in a way that respects the community and makes them good neighbors and provides an opportunity for both people to expand and live their life that are not students, but also enjoy some of the benefits that UGA brings to the community and hopefully be good neighbors with those folks. There is some expansion going on out towards the softball and soccer complex out South Millage Road, known as the Jack Turner Family Complex. They're currently looking at a track out there and have some opportunities for some potential development beyond that down the road. And then talked with them a little bit about that rail line that runs along the east side of campus and goes all the way out to the Jack Turner Family Complex, on through Whitehall and all the way out into Oconee. Athens Technical College has a variety of students. A lot of them who come to campus come by car. They do not actually really seek out students coming by bus. We had a bit of a discussion about that. They are looking to grow to about 6,000 students in this time period. Have a lot of dual enrolled folks in the high school and Athens Tech, only about 30% of those coming to campus. Quite a few students taking online courses, and they're looking at minimal brick and mortar expansion. So they just built a new building and they said that's really all that they have on their plans right now. They did talk about being a gateway and the potential to have better connection with the neighborhood around them. And possibly that could be the industry that's just to their east and their north, as well as the commercial activity out there near the Kroger development and the apartments that are going up. They specifically called out a commercial truck driving range, which CCD and then ACC actually jumped on and said, yes, this could be an opportunity. So opportunity to partner on a unique facility like that. Clarke County School District, the list of schools we have there. There's also 2 health centers on the campuses of the 2 middle schools at Hillsman and Clarke Middle. Looking for opportunities for walkability that would help out with the community. They mentioned the struggle for staff and a lot of the folks who work at the schools to be able to live within Clarke County. For many of them, the burden of housing costs makes it infeasible, which means they're all having to commute in from outside of Clarke County. So opportunities for housing would help out with some of the staff. And then they also spoke a little bit about some growth at the rural middle schools and how community centers could possibly be folded in to some of the schools to provide more opportunities for after-school programming for the students there. In terms of ACC, we're looking to build a new judicial center. We've got trail expansion on Firefly and Greenway, looking at 2, an east and west community center, potential for 3 new parks. Beach Haven is already ready to start becoming a natural area. Tallahassee Forest is more of a conservation area. And then they're looking for a potential recreational style park on the west side to mirror what is at Southeast Clarke Park. Looking to reinvigorate College Square, looking for commercial service at the airport, looking at opportunities like pocket parks and smaller parcels for green space development in and around these neighborhoods that we're hoping to prioritize. Looking to play a bigger role in affordable and workforce housing, using the things we have, such as the Baxter Street Library, and then also that they are into heavy operations with wastewater and need to be careful of some of the surrounding uses with some of the properties that Athens-Clarke County has. I could have sworn I changed that font like the boss told me to. Sorry about that. We got into housing in the next topic. And so this was one of our very vigorous discussions. Talked about the student population being the most flexible demographic. They live in 1-bedroom studios all the way up to larger houses. Current laws try and steer them away from some of our neighborhoods and towards others. This is quite tough to enforce, one of the issues we've seen. Wanted to mention the growth here. A lot of people think that UGA has grown compared to Athens-Clarke County. This gray line is the percent of population, and you can kind of see the steady growth that both the university and the Athens-Clarke County in recent times. It's actually dipped quite a bit just the last few years. It's ticked back up a little bit. So that gray line is percentage of UGA students compared to Athens-Clarke County residents there. So kind of plateaued a little bit. A few things about our housing, 2.24 people, average household size. Home ownership is about 40%. Price to income ratio, about 5. The economists like to see that number closer to 3. We have a fairly standardized population and age distribution. But in terms of bedrooms, we have a bit of a disparity here. This is what we're talking a lot about in housing. So 1.6% of the population living in studios, 11% in a 1-bedroom, 20% in a 4-bedroom plus, and then about 67% in the 2 to 3 bedroom range. So when we talk about some of these housing projects and some of the developments that come in, keep that in mind where a lot of these households are and what it takes to actually house a family in the modern era. The common 2 adults and 2.5 children with a picket fence, isn't exactly the model. That percentage of population is quite a bit lower than what we see from the development pattern that we've actually had over the last 40, 50, 60 years. We've got about 2,000 short-term rentals currently. In terms of property owner location, owner inside of Athens is almost 3/4 of our population. I think everyone thinks this number is probably a little bit different. So in terms of ownership outside of Athens, but in Georgia is another 20%. And then just about 7 or 8% own property in Athens-Clarke County, but live outside the state of Georgia. Most recent homeless count was 342 people. And so here's where we got into the discussion. Yes, sir.
Can you jump back one slide? That middle graphic, property owner location, is that for residential property in Athens or for short-term rentals?
That's for residential property. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so housing was a very vigorous discussion. We had Jared York, a local home builder, Buck Bacon, local civil engineer, Chase Lawrence, property owner and small scale developer. Jared Prickett works in the financial industry for Athens First. And then Tip Watley is another property manager. So we heard over and over density, and then we heard density again. And I think we heard it a third time while we were talking that night. And a lot of this, just for the record, when you see all this text, these are comments that we got out of the panel and out of the discussion from our steering committee. Flexibility for buy right development is needed. Old models are not working in our current market. We are down to a lot of the harder parcels to develop, topography, environmental areas, lots of infrastructure challenges. The level of housing has gotten more sophisticated. That's especially particular in the rental area. Land is getting scarce. Scouting for that land is getting intense. Underwriting guidelines are staying the same, but costs are going up. Rents have gone up quite a bit since the pandemic. 40% for single family detached, 25% for multifamily. Big jumps there in just a few years' time. Who should be driving this discussion on interest? So there was a lot of discussion about local, and I think this is a very common topic throughout many jurisdictions, very common in Athens-Clarke County from the dialogue I've heard, but about having local stakeholders, prioritizing local stakeholders over the out-of-town interests. If we want local banks and local developers, we need to work on things like missing middle housing that they can afford, that they can put into the market. That can be that incrementalism that we've seen. Those local vendors feed families here in our area. Older structures becoming affordable housing, such as older student complexes as the students move into the shiniest and brightest ones, mostly a lot around the downtown area. Students, this was a comment made that students and other demographics don't always overlap well, and that stormwater collection makes development quite tough. So flexibility around infrastructure. This is a lot about what you guys saw in our guiding principles. Scaling infrastructure regulations to fit parcels, making more future single family owner occupied. This third comment about multifamily is more about the student. One of our panelists there focuses solely on student development. So this rate that you see right down here about multifamily, that was a statement made about student development. I think we are all in this building thinking that the regular citizen of Athens-Clarke County can still use the multifamily and the missing middle housing that we see a lot of projects. But there is this feeling that in terms of straight student multifamily housing, we are getting built out in that range. That led into a discussion about what we need for the citizens of Athens-Clarke County more than the students. And that's what gets into this single family attached. The statement made by our home builder is if we put anything in 425 and under, it's going to get gobbled up instantly. There's a huge demand in that level for the market. So putting people near the things that we can, flexibility. The Housing Authority has quite a low density pattern in very high demand locations, opportunities there. We see that right behind us here in the North Downtown project. Density gives more options. That affords the upgrades. That's upgraded infrastructure or if that's upgraded amenities. Regulation reform, so allowing for different kinds of projects. The question about definition of family was brought up and whether it needs to be more fully enforced and if that would open up opportunities. And then code flexibility, square footage requirements, lot size reductions, lot coverage requirements, reductions in setback, more dwellings per driveway, and mass grading ordinance. Yes, sir.
In the middle there where it says in that parentheses, vacancy is 14%. Vacancy of what?
That was the student. Yeah, sorry. That's the student specific student purpose-built student housing was where that came from. Yeah, sorry. I tried to be very specific about that. Not multifamily for the average citizen.
Okay, and to what extent do you know, like, is that a citywide number that is reliable, or the panelists you mentioned where
Yeah.
there's one student housing developer on there, is that within that person's portfolio?
That came from their data. That person does have a product to be bought that deals with that data that is directly for purpose-built student housing, and that number came from him. Yeah.
So I'm asking.
But it was for the whole community. That was his take for the whole community.
That's his assessment
Yes,
for all student housing throughout the county.
correct.
And to what extent do you know, is that driven by buildings that haven't leased up yet, that just opened,
This
last?
was right after school started, and there was some worry about some of the incentives that were being provided for student housing that they were not full of. There were some numbers thrown around about where some of the student apartment complexes are at and why some of them are offering quite huge incentives for students to come in. And that was after the students had already got here this year.
Okay. Is it mostly like the older ones that are sitting empty?
Nope, these were the brand new ones.
Brand new ones, okay.
The newer, if I can say.
Sure,
Yeah.
please.
The big new ones that we're seeing over there, I think he went as far as 4 or 5 years back.
Okay.
So that would probably include Landmark, Standard,
Mhm.
all of those.
These big ones downtown,
are
too.
Specific to what he was seeing.
Okay, interesting.
And that discussion really was more about the shift of what does the community need, and that got into the 425.
Yeah.
Another person on the panel said, if we built $425,000, I think his statement was, we could build 1,000 of these tomorrow and they would all be purchased for townhomes under $425,000. There's that much, his feeling was there was that much demand for that type of product, as opposed to some of the student.
So like the takeaway would be, yeah, more focus on building in that category rather than student building?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I left off parking on there. Parking was a big discussion on code flexibility, which I think this body has heard quite a bit about, and recommended approval of a limited parking project just a little while ago. So, sorry, tons of words there. So we are looking forward. Our final meeting was talking about, as Alex mentioned, the future land use map is made up of 9 categories. They are 9 different colors. We are working on what the shade of those colors are right now. So we had a very brief discussion about the residential aspects, and I will hit these residential aspects and then I will get out of the way and let you guys talk. Limited agricultural use in and around the county, in terms of what can be done in terms of and I shouldn't say productive, in terms of what someone would think tends to be a rural business, that our rural area is a little bit more of the country estate lots and some of the other lots, conservation, but a little bit less focus on ag and more on how we can have people in those and still limit the sewer expansion. Most of the committee was talking about wanting the greenbelt to stay. There were some folks talking about the allowance for some subdivision, all of that being off sewer. The whole discussion favored only development that did not need sewer expansion. So here we need 25,500 square feet for a septic tank. If you need a well, that gets up to around an acre. There's this debate. We have 10-acre minimums in the AR now. Do we go down to 5 acres and sort of double our potential? Or do we allow it to go down even further that would allow with other regulations such as well and septic? Allowing small commercial in neighborhoods was a hot topic that was supported quite well by the body, that the character of these neighborhoods is very important. Providing some of that design backup to allow more flexibility in these neighborhoods was taken well. Hard to define taste. So there was some discussion about, how much do you put on in terms of design standards? One person's beautiful home is another person's, eyesore. So being mindful of the fact that regulating that is a very tough thing to do. Making sure that the nodes are very specific in terms of the characteristics. So they have some of their own ability and idea to be separated from some of the areas around them, acknowledge the uniqueness of some of the different parts of our community and not make these all homogeneous. And then for people to get on board with allowing more housing options in single family, there needs to be this strong sense of design from the community. So it's that giving up a little bit of control to allow a little bit better design. So I think this body is fairly well versed in that notion. Just to let you know, here is our timeline. We're right there by that star. But just so you guys know, we're looking well into the future with this. So looking at probably early next year for final adoption of this. We also have a very important document from our utilities department, their service delivery strategy coming in that we are very happy that we are working in conjunction with them. Our next task on our work program after this is to look at missing middle housing, continue the development code updates. And then I know 2026, looking into 2028 sounds far off, but we expect a fairly robust process into our next comprehensive plan update, which is in 2028. So that is all we have for 6 meetings with our steering committee. Would love to hear some comments and questions and some guidance from this body so we can keep them on the right path. I know we have a few committee members here tonight, so really happy they showed up, as well as all the public. So thanks a lot. Happy to answer as many questions. And just like I said, I know we went through a ton there. I would be more than happy to provide some of the information and some of the stuff we've done through these commissions and some of the notes, if you all are looking for that. So thank you very much.
Could you give us like a PDF of the presentation?
Yes, yeah, so it would be definitely, I can shoot this out to the planning commission.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because there's a lot of interesting numbers in there. I'd like to look at it.
And there's been discussion about where some of this is settled. I think putting some of this on our website, the minutes and some of the presentations we've given is a very good idea. That's been asked by us. And as opposed to having to share out emails all the time, I think we'll get that handled here in the next few days.
Can you put this on ACC website?
Yes.
That'd be good.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Alex. Thank you to the committee for all their work on this. So at this time, we will invite members of the public who wish to give comment or ask questions to take turns stepping up to the podium, and staff or the planning commission as appropriate can address any questions that you may have.
Hello, my name is Amy Andrews. I live at 282 King Avenue, and I'm here to talk about studentification. Studentification is a term that was coined by an English researcher of housing in the 1980s. And it is basically gentrification through displacement of a historical group of residents by students and investors. And in Athens, Georgia, we have very good examples of what's happening as studentification. This came to my attention particularly when I was working on my thesis for my master's degree in historic preservation. I did my thesis on the Reese Street neighborhood, and I studied it intently, tax assessor records, interviews, et cetera. My thesis was basically on the impact of local historic designation 15 years ago and how it impacted the neighborhood. And while it protected the built environment, it did not protect studentification that was happening and continues to happen. So back in 2008, when the neighborhood was designated, there were only 15 parcels owned by African-American residents out of 84 in the neighborhood of what was a neighborhood that was founded by African-Americans post-emancipation and had been quite a significant neighborhood with educational and cultural resources. In the 80s, the investors started buying up in the neighborhood, and that was aligned with the Hope Scholarship. And now 79% of the neighborhood is owned by investors. And today only 6 African-American residents remain, actually 5, one is white, and they own 8 parcels of land. And I think what some of the issues with studentification was addressed in Mr. Beechek's report, but when we're projecting 30,000 new residents, if you look at enrollment statistics at UGA, half of those new residents are going to be UGA students. And so that is, we have to be very conscious of the fact that when we talk about providing housing, what we're doing is we're taking the neighborhoods that are most vulnerable and we're allowing the private market to provide housing. There were 40,000 students at the University of Georgia. University of Georgia only provides housing for 22% of those. That leaves 78% of them to be housed by investors in the community. And they're going to want to be downtown. They're going to want to be close to campus. And your historic African neighborhoods, East Athens, Morristown, Newtown, Reese Street, are those neighborhoods in which investors are purchasing, have purchased, and will continue to purchase. Right now, Reese Street neighborhood is all zone multifamily with some other but there's no single family zoning. In essence, that has almost protected it because they were allowed more density with smaller parcels instead of combining.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public wishing to speak, please just step up to the podium.
Could I yield my time to have her finish?
Yeah, right.
I'll gladly give her my 3 minutes, because she's saying exactly what we want.
Exactly.
Hearing no objection from any member of the planning commission, I think we can, by acclamation, allow the speaker 1 additional 3-minute period.
Thank you. So I mentioned that we have over 40,000 students, and most of them are being housed by the investor market, and that is targeting these historic African-American neighborhoods in town. The 45,000 figure that you heard is projected for student enrollment by 2028. And while they're putting the brakes on undergraduate enrollment, they're increasing transfer student enrollment. So you're essentially going to get as many or more students. Let's see if I can look at my notes and figure out. There are two investors who own 9 or more properties in the Reese Street neighborhood. And I'm sure this is the case in many of the historic African-American neighborhoods. And they're sitting on a lot of vacant property that borders West Broad in the hopes, I'm sure, of rezoning. And one of the things I found during my research is that Athens made a huge mistake when it rezoned the other side of Finley Street to commercial downtown without allowing for a transition between it and what is essentially built as a single family neighborhood. So we have 8-story student high rises overlooking single family. There should have been a transition there somehow, either in setbacks or zoning in the front. And so we've got this intense private equity, pressure by private equity firms, as well as by local investors who have developed a cottage market and basically, are living off paying $28,000, $30,000 for a home 20 years ago and renting it to 4 or 5 college students. And the university enrollment, Black enrollment usually is only 7.5%. But most of these investors and the students that are living here are white college students. And it's almost sacrilegious to have them walking in the footsteps of these emancipated African Americans who became professionals and educators and established this amazing neighborhood. And we're not planning for it. So in the future land use map, Reese Street is considered a traditional neighborhood, but in essence, it is an investor neighborhood. And I don't think we're paying enough attention through the future land use map, through planning and zoning regulations. And I don't have the answers. I don't know what can be done here. But I think we are letting the market really take advantage of a third of our population. So that's all I have to say, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other member of the public here who wishes to give public comment? Good. Seeing none, we will get back behind the rail. And does any member of the planning commission have comments or questions for staff? Yes, sir.
I'm really glad Amy brought that up. And I'm thinking back to, so to be clear, I don't think allowing accessory dwelling units is going to fix our housing problems, but it's really frustrated a couple of years ago when I watched our mayor and commission not even be able to allow for ADUs. And one of the reasons was concerns that were very, very specific to some older in-town neighborhoods. And I do think that there are some neighborhoods, like what Amy is describing, that very much kind of need a little bit of a different touch. And I don't know what that is, but I do know that, for example, not allowing ADUs countywide because we're concerned about them in one neighborhood, in-town neighborhood in Athens, is not really where we want to go. Like it's possible that that there are some kind of special places that need some different type of thinking applied to them because they just have unique characteristics like what Amy was describing, and it's not quite the same. And I don't have a solution to that either. I just always kind of felt like they needed something a little bit different in the process.
Other comments or questions? I guess one thing that, I'm sorry, yeah.
I would
go
just
ahead.
say, I mean, as the newest person here, but a longtime resident, that is a tremendous concern. And living in town, I've seen that transformation. And I would like to see, what is within the purview that we could do to protect what's left.
I just want to express my appreciation for Ms. Andrews' comments. I think your points are extremely well taken. I think that it underscores Athens exists because there's a university here. There are always going to be students here, and enrollment is going to grow, and nobody can really control that outside of the University Board of Governors, right? The university enrollment is going to grow, and students are going to be here. And historically, UGA students, particularly since the Hope Scholarship, have been able to outbid many local people for housing. They can pay more because their parents are paying their rent. And their parents are not always, but often considerably wealthier than the median Athenian. And so I understand from the presentation that a couple numbers right around 1/5, right? That UGA provides housing for approximately 1/5 of its students. 19 or 22%, it probably changes from year to year, but something in the ballpark of 20% of the students are housed on campus in dormitories. And there's a number of these, what Ms. Andrews referred to as these student high rises. I think they're really mid rises, technically, 5, 6-story buildings. That they're sort of like private dormitories. They're purpose built for students. We would all like UGA, I think, to house more students on campus. And I would point out that the next best thing is for students to be housed in dormitory style accommodations. If they're on campus, great. If UGA will build them, that's great. If not, some of these buildings that people find maybe aesthetically not to their liking, at least they house students there rather than in old housing in neighborhoods, right? I mean, that's the alternative. Those students are going to come, they're going to find a bed to sleep in because their parents are going to pay for it. And if it's not in a mid-rise dormitory style student building, then we're going to keep seeing the studentification of neighborhoods, right? They're going to bid up the prices for existing housing if they're not housed in new purpose-built student housing. So that's what we can control, is not the student enrollment. It's to some degree in planning for future land use, we can encourage purpose-built student housing that is very close to campus or on campus, so that they don't take over any more of the Reese Hancock or the Cars Hill neighborhood or some of the other fairly nearby neighborhoods, right? And our choices are there going to be more students, because we can't control that. They're just going to be housed in dorms, or they're going to take over the existing neighborhoods more than they've already done. And so I appreciate I know the committee has been attentive to that and has talked about with the UGA representatives about encouraging more purpose-built student housing very close to, ideally contiguous with campus, so that it does not continue to take over more and more of the historic neighborhoods in town. And I think Ms. Andrews' comments really just underscore the necessity of doing that. Yeah, that's my comment.
This is more of an observation.
I welcome your comment, but would you please come to the podium just so that we're sure that everyone can hear you?
Well, I don't know that. My observation is that, number one, when you talk about land use, you've talked about the University of Georgia, you talked about the homeless, but what about the seniors in this community? Nothing was said about that.
So, and you're right, nothing in our summary tonight was mentioning any population above the age of 50, really.
Right.
I will say that when we were doing our community outreach in the fall, we made a point to engage with some of our purpose-built housing for folks that are above the age of 50. We met with Columbia Brookside and had a really good interaction with the folks living out of Columbia Brookside. What we want to do is not create an environment where the folks in that age range are priced out, are without opportunity. And that's a challenge. I think we've heard that from some of Ms. Andrews' comments.
Exactly.
Is how do you create those opportunities on a land use map? That is one piece of the puzzle. But we are aware and very sensitive to that because I can't remember the percentage right now. I want to say it was north of 20% of our population fits in that age range. Even though we're a very young community, we are very diverse from an age group standpoint. There you go, the graphic in the lower left. If there's any way to make that out.
Yeah. Oculus, who can see?
That's why. It was on the website.
Yeah,
That's 20.
make it where everybody. But, you know, one of the things that Athens is also promoted as across the country as a place to come and retire,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And so how do we make all of those pieces of the puzzle work when we know that we have this extra force on our housing market that comes from the university, as Matt was just explaining? It's coming. It's here. It's not going away and it's not going to diminish. So how do we try to strike a balance with our policies? Land use is one, but there's a bunch of other things that we need to be aware of, and we need to keep working together to be able to do these things well. Columbia Brookside has had a kind of a mixed sort of report card at this point. I think anybody involved in it would say that. But I think there are aspects to it that are worth looking at for doing in some other locations. And one of the things that was mentioned in the presentation was looking at housing authority property. That is one partner in our community that works a lot with folks that are older than 50. How do we work with them to have properties that are helping those folks and not have to move away? How to age in place? How to not have to leave your neighborhood when those places redevelop? But we've also got folks that have invested here and are now on fixed incomes. How are they going to continue to be able to afford
Exactly.
that life?
When you allow students to come here and jack the prices up on taxes.
That's right. So taxes are not land use, but.
But I'm
land
just
use-
saying, that's one of the downsides.
That's exactly right. And
That's
those
all I'm
two
saying.
things respond to each
Exactly.
other. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So, you know, this is a discussion to kind of raise the grain of the wood for a bunch of other discussions that we've got to have as a community to take that next step. So if it's taxation that we need to look at, that's a pretty complicated thing to wrestle with. That's something you have to deal with at the state level. We can't make up our own rules here locally, but it's not a reason to not start the discussion.
Exactly.
So thank you for saying what you said, because it isn't represented in this report tonight, but it is absolutely a part of the discussion that we've been having and will continue to have.
Thank you, ma'am. And just for the record, could you please identify yourself?
Oh. Deborah Gunter, Gunter.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments, and thank you, Bruce, for your comments. Is there any other member of the public wishing to comment on anything that was heard tonight? Yes, Mr. Payne.
Now, we're gonna let him speak because he gave us 3 minutes. I'm kidding. Okay.
This is more of a,
Well, I'll just trade around.
totally unrelated to my previous comments, because I think she said everything that I wanted her to say. Quazon Payne, District 9 representative. I'm getting a lot of comment and a lot of requests for us to revisit ADUs for a lot of reasons. So I would just like kind of indirect permission from this body, because this is where the recommendation came from, to pool our commissioners to find out what their issues are, to give some research and to see if we can't bring it to closer resolutions back for a vote. Because it was denied by 1 vote prior. And I think if we write it correctly and we tie it so that investors can't take advantage of ADUs, and we tie it to home ownership, and we address the parking issues, all of the issues can be addressed if we write it up correctly. But there is a huge need for ADUs on some of our parcels that would solve, aging parents,
would solve the 24-year-old son that I want to put out of my house. You know, so, yeah. So, you know, I just want permission from this body to go back and indirectly do that research and work with you on trying to get that done.
Thank you.
Waste ADUs, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you. As the chair, I'll just tell you, I don't know that you need our permission, but I believe you've got it. This body voted unanimously in favor of the ADU proposal that we recommended up to the
Right.
commission. As you say, it had.
Kind of got sidetracked on the vote and it wasn't.
That's right.
Items weren't
That's
addressed.
right. It was one vote short of passing and
Fear was thrown in there and, yeah.
yes. And so personally, I'll volunteer to come to any meeting that you set up with commissioners who want to talk about the manner in which it might be tweaked to make it something that they could support.
Well, I want to pool them privately and one-on-one to find out what their issues are and bring those issues back to you anonymously so that we can address them in the write-up and then maybe present it again for hope. Okay?
We welcome that sort of citizen involvement. Thank you very much.
Good. Told you it was unrelated. And to your point of the 425, 1,000.
It wasn't my point for the.
But that's what developers are building and that's what capitalism is driving here in Athens. And yes, they'll sell like hotcakes, but they're not looking at the 200 and the 250,000. And we've got to address that in some way.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Payne. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to add any comment? And is there any other member of the planning commission who wishes to add?
I had a question. One of the points that was in the presentation was talking about the notion that better enforcement of the definition of family ordinance might create new opportunities. What was the conversation?
You speak a little louder.
What was the conversation about that? So I was asking, one of the points on the slides was the notion that better enforcement of the definition of family ordinance might create opportunities. And I'm just curious what that conversation was. If you all remember kind of what opportunities they thought were there.
I mean, can I just a quick mention, and I brought up some of that, is with the real estate license, we have to be very careful with that word because it can leave, it can set up the wrong, and you can jump in too if you need, but she has a real estate license, but we can't imply what a family is. We don't have necessarily the definition of that, and that's changing for better and worse. I mean, I think it's for worse in some ways and maybe better in others. But when you release what we may call that, then that may make it so that more than two unrelated people can live in a house. Because what is a family? What is related? But, you know.
But I don't understand the connection between what a realtor can say and what the law is in Athens.
The trend is going in that direction. So it's.
To enforce it more or to remove it?
To remove it. And I'm not implying my thought on that one way or the other. I'm just saying that is something that one entity has to be very careful what they say. And that is somewhat for a reason. And so if the government goes in that direction and undoes that, then what that means is now single family, what you can't say single family. Yeah. So and we're looking 20 years down the road too. We're not necessarily talking about today. And I like to watch staff get nervous when I start seeing certain things, and I'm reading them right now to see them.
So was it less about, I think the way I saw it on the slide was that better enforcement could create more opportunities, but I think I'm hearing the opposite.
So I won't name names, but the source of the comment was really coming at it from an angle of someone who was pro definition of family. And that particular topic you can slice it a bunch of different ways and you can shine a light on it from a bunch of different angles and you can make a case for or against it. Both, they're all very well-founded depending on what angle you put on it. The comment on the screen, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was from a neighborhood stabilization standpoint. So it was very pro for the standard to be enforced because of destabilization of certain neighborhoods, because of student presence, because of investment of activity, because of some of the factors that maybe enforcing that definition of family would mitigate. Bringing some balance to that discussion. We certainly hear discussion from folks similar to kind of what Alex is getting at, I think, is that if that definition of family rule was not in effect, you would have the opportunity for 3 and 4 people to share a mortgage payment, to share rent, to share the cost of housing. And so we're going to have a debate in this community about that definition of family, and it gets talked about on the election cycles. And then when we get into actual meeting format, it's one of those topics that's really hard to bring up. But from a future land use standpoint, I don't think we're going to wade into those waters.
Yeah, because that's actually not part of it at all. Right?
Well, it's in the zoning code, but from a future land use standpoint, we're going to try to put things on the map for our growth writ large, big bandwidths of growth. When we get into the zoning code, it's likely to come up. And definition of family, as this community has seen it, has been a way to, for those who are in favor of it, to hold the tide. And if we're going to have discussion about increasing density in certain single family neighborhoods and increasing opportunity for certain construction type, I think we're going to hear that discussion about definition of family come up with some folks in the community seeing that as a way to say, okay, I'm okay with the duplex, but you got to enforce the definition of family. I'm okay with a quadplex, but you got to have design standards and you got to enforce the definition of family. So I don't know how to handicap that. I don't know how to predict which direction that conversation is going to go, but I bet it's going to be a part of it. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I would.
I did have just one other factual question. You mentioned the urban 3 econometric study that's coming down the pipeline. Is there a timeline on when we expect that?
Yeah, I mean, before the holidays, our intention is for our next steering committee meeting for them to virtually be there for the first 20 or 30 minutes. These meetings are all open to the public. So if they've been at 2 to 4 p.m. on Mondays. So for some reason the committee said that was a great time. Works out. But yeah, so it's closer to the holidays until they're going to be doing their work.
Okay,
and
thank you.
Minor setbacks. Hurricane.
Any other comments?
Got more. If nobody else does, I don't want to. So there is an interesting thing we've learned too. And I'm looking at this even from a real estate point of view, that when you think of what's been built over the last 5 years, we probably all have the same thing in our mind. What do we see being built? And it's typically the mid-rise student housing because they're sort of obvious. They're in places that you see them, and that's what they're building. The number of bedrooms, I think, seem clear on that. And now it's been a rush also from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing from different places, that you've got these national companies just getting their foot in this door in Athens. Now they're doing it in other colleges too. It's not just Athens, but they're rushing to do that. And these national companies have to spend money. They have departments to spend money. So they're going to get money and spend it. And they can afford the 14% loss, or the 20 or whatever. They can sustain it. It is in their business plan. It ain't no thing to them. They can just do it. Where the more local, smaller names that we know we look at them as being very wealthy, but they're not billionaires in general. The folks that own, local folks that own the shopping centers and the things. So they can't compete with that. And they're having to be smart. When you got all the money in the world and all the resources, you can be a fat cat, and make bad decisions and keep your job. You can't do that when that money actually has to feed your family. So it was brought up by bankers and by builders when, and you brought it up too as well, Mark, that when the local companies are able to go in and do this and borrow from a local bank, it does feed the community better than somebody from New York coming in, making their money and going out. And then that can size them down to the small investor, or rather the small family that is trying to buy that. And so jumping over a little bit, enforcing the single family rule, if you can enforce it, you're now going to run students out of these neighborhoods into those buildings and make it more affordable for anybody in this room to purchase a house on whatever street we're talking about. So it's a lot of moving things, and a lot of it, like Bruce had said, and Mark, it's not future land use issue. We're doing this, and then zoning has to sort of catch up and do this. And then this has to happen, and then that, it spreads all over the place. And so we're just trying to capture what's going to be simple for when an investor looks at, I want to build a shopping center. Well, I don't want to do it here because this is what the land use is that they want. So that's not going to make sense. But over here, and then they can investigate. We actually had one builder in there that has done this in another community, looked at their future land use map and went, okay, I can do this. Like, they understood it, and it welcomed them to steering them into the proper thing that we want as a community. So that's what we're seeing, and maybe they'll be pulling off. I don't want to keep rambling here, but some of these big time investors will slow down a little bit, and then the rest of everybody else can catch up a little bit.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, then that concludes the future land use map update progress report item, and brings us to the final section of our agenda, other business. Item 1 under that is the Planning Commission Chair's report, and I have none. Item 2 is the Planning Director's report. Ruth?
And as the interim version of that, I will say, tomorrow is the deadline for receiving items for our next agenda. So we've had how many pre-apps?
We have 4 items already submitted. We're expecting at least another one.
Okay. So the forecast is we'll be busy. But all the more reason, I appreciate y'all's attention and attendance here tonight. I think this was kismet, like to be, that we would have this kind of thin agenda, so that we could have this kind of qualitative discussion. And our hope for the future is to have more of these as time allows. We are about to do some stuff that's going to set the table for big change, and hopefully all good changes. So we appreciate the work that you're doing, the attention tonight.
All right, thank you. Item 3 is miscellaneous announcements. Does anyone have anything?
Welcome, Jen.
Yeah, we can welcome Jen Fleece, our newest member of the Planning Commission. And I'll just close by, again, thanking the members of the community who came out to share your thoughts with us. We really do appreciate you. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
All in favor? Any opposed?
I did. Mike.
The meeting is adjourned.
Hey.